Week 4 is already underway. I mean, Sunday, there's a game. It's London. In New Orleans, Chris Allen in New Orleans, all the places open at 8 a.m. Like, we got 8 a.m. drink specials. We got sausage, egg, and cheese po' boys, So even though there's not a lot for the
Oh, the
Saints to
Bloody
celebrate.
Marys. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what I was sipping on those the last time I was down there
Man,
that early in the
that's
morning.
the key.
Yeah.
You understand. See, because you have to stay up on that wave. You can't let the wave pull you down under. But
Yeah.
the Bloody Mary gives you the vitamins, right? So you
Yeah.
don't want to totally come down while you're in New Orleans, but you also need to give your body some nourishment with that liquid breakfast. But hopefully you all are enjoying whatever your liquid breakfast is. And again, not a lot for the Saints to celebrate otherwise, but at least they got a punt from the Vikings. But let's jump in because I know we got lots of questions. We've got questions too, but y'all got lots of questions. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to go on before with the Mark Ingram and the Alvin Kamara news. But let's go ahead and jump in. And there's a lot of injury questions here. We'll have to call on the spirit of Dr. Gene to help us. Let's start with, I want to make sure I want to, Dave Kluge had a question. Wow. Well, let's start with Mike Mitchell, who was in here like 2 hours ago.
Oh, wow.
I know. You guys are awesome. Dylan and Dobbs, I could plug in, trying to replace Amon-Ra, or could pick up Josh. I'm assuming Reynolds is Josh Reynolds. Remember, there's 2 Reynolds for the Lions this week. Worried about game script in New England, Green Bay. So we're looking at A.J. Dillon, Romeo Dobbs, or let's say Josh Reynolds for Mike.
I definitely I do like AJ Dillon like for this week, just because given the opportunity that he's seeing so far, not just as a rusher, but a pass catcher as well, and an efficient pass catcher. Like, you just look at you see the quads, you hear all the superlatives about him just rumbling down the field, but he's actually been an efficient pass catcher alongside Aaron Jones. So even if that game does project to be a little slow, I mean, especially with the Packers defense going up against the fighting Brian Hoyers, I do think that this is a matchup that I would plug Dillon into my lineup without having to worry much about the passing game or any struggles that the wide receivers might continue to have with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Josh Reynolds is fine, kind of a big slot like type of player that we've seen him be like for Detroit. He's like 6'2", 6'3", something like that. So it's just I would prefer the floor of what Dillon's opportunity is going to be versus whatever we think about the Packers passing game or Detroit's passing game without their star players.
Yeah, you can see it's almost like, I don't want to blaspheme and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and everything going to Tagovailoa, but you look at that Miami pass offense and in any one week one of them might go off and be a week winner for you. The other one may be a little bit under expectations. And I think that's kind of like Dillon and Jones. I think you're looking at them as you might get a low end running back 2 week, you might get a high end running back 1 week because this offense is going to put points. They're going to control the game. Dobbs is interesting. Chris, I'm open to the idea that over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we may be moving Dobbs into our every week starts.
I think so.
I'm definitely open to that. And if someone wants to be aspirational with him today against New England, I'm not going to talk them out of that. I wish Josh Reynolds was healthy. If Josh Reynolds was healthy, then I would be really pushing him a lot more. What I'm really interested to see today with Detroit against Seattle, and some of this is, hey, Seattle's defense is not great, young secondary, is how much. So you have an offensive line for the Lions, and you have Ben Johnson scheming up plays. Now, you don't have Amon-Ra St. Brown. You don't have DJ Chark. You don't have DeAndre Swift. You still have Hawkinson. You still have, of course, Josh Reynolds. And don't forget about Khalif Raymond.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're putting together some DFS lineups, get a little frisky, you want to put some diversity in for the Millie Maker or whatever the kids are doing these days with DFS lineups. Khalif Raymond's interesting guy here. Yeah. But also, I think what's interesting about this Detroit-Seattle game is it could be one of the highest scoring games of the day. Certainly over-under indicates that. I think people might be thinking without the top playmakers for the Lions, not so much. We'll see. All right, Dave Kluge, man. What's up, Dave?
What's going on, Dave?
Thanks for setting this. Dave does some nice work behind the scenes getting this set up so I can just roll out of bed, pour myself some coffee, and do this. Is he crazy for wanting to start Trevor Lawrence over Kirk Cousins, who's playing right now, and Derek Carr? And really the larger question here is, because you put it right in your tag, Chris, in your title there, FFWX. So thoughts, good vibes to everybody down in Southwest Florida and in South Carolina. And again, any members of our community, if we can help you in any way, please reach out. I know that there's at least one member of the fantasy football community. There's already been a fundraiser for them, and we take care of everyone we can in the fantasy football community. But that weather's shifted up the East Coast, and it's not a tropical system anymore, but it could be affecting Philadelphia and Jacksonville, which is, for fantasy, it's sad because what we're looking at is like torrential rains and winds 10, 15 miles an hour, maybe a little bit higher. So you have the Philly-Jacksonville game, which we're really looking forward to from an offensive standpoint, and the Buffalo-Baltimore game, also a game we're looking forward to from an offensive standpoint. We can't feel free to just ignore this. And of course, we will have a better idea closer to game time. But I think this is really when you get into the Trevor Lawrence questions, or maybe, you're not going to be taking out your key players. You're not taking out Jalen Hurts, right? You're not taking out Josh Allen. You're not taking out Lamar Jackson, et cetera, et cetera. But it could help be a tiebreaker, or will it help be a tiebreaker? Let's give Dave some help. Trevor Lawrence or Derek Carr, and of course, talking about the weather.
So we're already seeing tweets like coming out of Philadelphia about how bad the rain is right now, even though we're still like 3-ish hours away from kickoff since the 1:00 game. But it doesn't look good. And looking at the radar, like over the past couple of days, it just seemed like I kind of expected these conditions, what we're seeing right now. We saw like Jason Kelsey out there in like a torrential downpour. Is what it looked like there on the field. But the field is covered by a tarp, like per league regulations, that they can keep it covered up until about like 2 hours before kickoff. So it'll probably be covered for another hour or so. So that's not too terribly surprising. But I do think if you had to decide, because Kirk Cousins is currently playing right now, if you had to decide between T-Law or Derek Carr, I probably would wind up still going with Trevor Lawrence. It's difficult with this Raiders passing game, and if they're actually going to get, I guess, out of their own way. In a sense, just because it just seems like, again, you are the creator of the assumption of rational coaching, and it's just, while I think structurally things have been like how we expect them to be, like we're seeing them pass more because they brought in Devontae Adams, and they have at least replacements for Hunter Renfrow. We saw Mac Hollins have a big day last week, but we haven't seen the focused passing game go towards Devontae Adams. And that connection that they talked about between him and Carr over the entire offseason really hasn't been as prominent on the field as we expected it to. So with the way that the Jags have been playing so far, like unequivocally, like they have been a good football team, a well-coached football team. And so while I do think that the weather is going to be somewhat of an impediment, like for today's game, I don't mind starting Trevor Lawrence over Derek Carr, just given what we've seen out of the Raiders offense so far. I give the lean towards Lawrence in this matchup.
Yeah. Let's see what the weather is at game time. And you're right. It's so funny. We were thinking shootouts, AFC West. And what do we have? Yeah, we have, like you said, the Raiders offense can't really get out of their way. Interesting today, no Hunter Renfrow, no Foster Moreau. So at the very least, it helps you with Darren Waller. Now, if Patrick Surtain is on Devontae Adams, Mac Hollins, I don't know if we're going to get into any Mac Hollins questions. He's certainly interesting. And Mac Hollins is another guy, Chris. In a week or two, we might be saying, well, we're not really answering Mac Hollins questions anymore because he's put up 2, 3, 4 good weeks in a row. And he's actually underrated. And he's going to benefit from these matchups. He's going to benefit from the lack of attention that he gets. But and then Kansas City, their offense is sputtering. They're going to face Tampa Bay tonight. That's not exactly a game that screams shootout, although Tampa Bay is getting a lot of their pieces back. And the Chargers, oh my God, smoke's coming out of the hood. They're on the side of the road in a ditch right now. So
couple of flat tires and everything.
Right. And we don't even want to get into Russell Wilson and the Denver offense. So yeah, all those shootouts, not exactly, more like shot. All right. Gee whit. It's great. And I feel this because it's only 4 weeks in, Chris, but still we are having to wonder, at least in Superflex leagues, am I starting Justin Fields? Do I dare go? G Witt says Fields over Goff, worried about Goff's lack of weapons, but Fields a bit atrocious. Coming from a Bears fan, I'm sorry, at least you got 1986. So are we ready with Goff not having his weapons, top 3 weapons or 2 of his top 3 weapons today, to put Justin Fields in?
Oh, I'm fine with Jared Goff for this week, and I think it's just two things kind of working in his favor. Because if you were to think that, again, assuming rational coaching, like most other coaches, if they had some of their top playmakers out, they might adjust their playmaking or their offensive play calling. But if you just look at the way that Dan Campbell's approached just the culture of Detroit's offense, do you really think that he cares? Like, do you think they're going to turn down the intensity or anything like that?
No.
I don't see that. Like, not one iota. It doesn't matter if they were calling up some of the practice squad players or something along those lines. They would still be playing in the same fashion in my mind for the good or betterment, like of the, for worse or better for the team. But I think the other portion is that looking at Seattle's defense, and this was a stat from Rich Rebar, and this was coming into week 3. Seattle was the only team like in the entire NFL that had not allowed or had not had a 3-and-out at all throughout the entire season. And they only had one last week.
Right. Against Atlanta.
And against Atlanta. So it's just if the defense is inept and Detroit can still continue to get things going. I mean, we know Jamal Williams can be at least effective of a pass catcher. We know at least Josh Reynolds, assuming he's healthy, he can be at least a functional big slot receiver. I mean, the key pieces are missing, but I think Jared Goff is in a much better spot than Justin Fields at this point.
Yeah, and Fields has to prove it to us, first of all. I want to invent a term for this. Someone can take this and run with this. The idea of a player that you're not dropping, but you're keeping on your bench until they go off. And then when they go off, you're happy that you have them at least. But you're not putting them in your lineup hoping that this week is going to be the week. I think Fields is absolutely in that category. I also think the weather for Bears Giants isn't going to be great either.
Yeah, a little rain, a little bit of wind. Yeah.
Although that was his best passing game. Was it on monsoon against San Francisco? So maybe that's what he needs, right? Maybe it's like was it like the Bishop or whoever it was in Caddyshack, right? Maybe that's what Justin Fields needs. Gunga Galunga. Anyway, I think that with just Jared Goff, like I said earlier, what we're going to see today is whether this Lions offense manufactures production based on their offensive line play design, play execution, and Jared Goff understanding the why of the play designs. And again, Quintez Cephas, I'll bring up that name. It isn't like the number 4 and number 5 receivers for the Lions. Remember, they're going to get Jameson Williams back eventually too. This offense is not that thin as far as the quality. Remember, Quintez Cephas was starting for this team last year. So yeah, Jared Goff, I think people are going to be surprised he's going to be okay. And I love that stat about Seattle's defense. Let's remember, week 1, without 2 fumbles in the goal line, they give up 30 points.
Yep.
Week 2, San Francisco loses their starting quarterback and everything's still fine. I think their 1 touchdown was on a blocked field goal, Seattle. And then again, Atlanta, Kyle Pitts got going. Cordell Patterson. We haven't got one of those questions yet. But, spoiler alert, if Patterson's active, I'm playing him. All right. Mohammed. What's up, Mohammed? Who would you start between Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Michael Carter, and Craig Reynolds?
I lean CEH in this matchup, and I'm just at this point I'm being stubborn. I understand that, but if you compare CEH to the other two, I mean Michael Carter, Breece Hall has now become at least it's still essentially a time split on the rushing production, but Breece Hall has been getting such a massive target share over the past couple of weeks. And Craig Reynolds is more of just a speculative. I mean, if you want to have him on your roster, I mean, in emergency break glass type of thing. But CEH, I'm hoping that they try and get this passing game going with him, and we'll see if the rushing improves. But it's just at this point, the opportunity, even in a worse matchup against the Bucs, I lean towards CEH.
Yeah, that's got to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And going over the Jets running backs really fast, Breece Hall finally got 1-2 more snaps than Carter last week. He's more involved in the passing game. Now, the big question mark here is the Jets offense with Zach Wilson. So you might watch 1 quarter of this game and think it's the Steelers without TJ Watt, but it's still the Steelers. You might watch 1 quarter of this game and think, why did I start any Jets at all? Even Tyler Conklin, even Breece Hall. Or you might say, hey, actually, Zach Wilson looks like he's a little better equipped mentally and physically to pilot this offense with a lot of talent around him. Although I think they're down to their 4th and 5th string tackles, I want to say.
Something along those lines.
Something like that. So we'll see. But I think you're right that it's Edwards-Helaire. And with Craig Reynolds, he could hit the classic what the heck flex, because I do think you're going to see this running game. He's a good player too. They like him. He clearly beat out Jamar Jefferson. And this offense, again, could be one of those offenses that is plug and play. But it's Edwards-Helaire. And what's interesting about Edwards-Helaire, just a quick tangent, Chris. I mean, we really have come full circle in fantasy football where there aren't buy lows or sell highs anymore, because if everybody's saying sell high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, then you can't sell high. And there's no high to sell him on because everyone's saying get out. But I think that this is one of those interesting situations where, because we're so focused on usage stats and rate stats and things like that right now, that we may be missing the forest for the trees, that he's still getting the high value. I think Dr. Gene was the first one to use this term, like high leverage touches.
Mm-hmm.
He's still, and even if it's not automatically his number called at the red zone, they still try. He's one of the few trusted players in the passing game.
Mm-hmm.
And you, at some point, you can't argue with the numbers. Like John Norton would say, 1 week could be a fluke, 2 weeks a trend, 3 weeks, he's a top 5, top 10 running back in PPR leagues. It speaks to how depressed running back scoring is, but it also speaks to that he's a trusted player in times when they need a play, they call his number. And even if he's only on the field for 40% of the snaps, if it's 3 weeks in a row producing fantasy friendly numbers, then especially against Tampa, because I think you just concede the running game's not going to work. And that probably means a lot of receptions for Clyde EdwardsHelaire and probably some red zone. Going back to Zach Wilson, Muhammad Askin, Garrett Wilson or Alec Pierce?
Oh, I lean towards Garrett Wilson. I mean, regardless of what you think about Zach Wilson becoming the starting quarterback again, I mean, Garrett Wilson has been able to earn targets like over the past like few weeks in the way that I didn't really project him to. I know that he was one of the like more preferred like rookie wide receivers in this class, but we just seen it from an air yards perspective, a target share perspective. Like even once they get into the red zone, and this offense has been relatively functional with Joe Flacco. Now that might take a step back with Zach Wilson, but we can't argue with the opportunity that that Garrett has had since he's joined the team. So yeah, I definitely lean towards Garrett Wilson here.
Garrett Wilson's a play by the book here. He's a play by the book because he's the super talented player. And we just need Zach Wilson to get the ball into his hands. We just need Zach Wilson to take some shots downfield to him. I'm not going to talk folks out of Alec Pierce today, or at least I want to put a little spotlight on Alec Pierce, again, as a lineup diversity guy, simply because a lot of rave reviews about him. Remember, he missed week 1 was ignominious for him. I think he dropped the ball in the end zone. He had a concussion, like not exactly the debut you're looking for. Week 2 out. Week 3, I don't think he was even in for 50% of the snaps last week, and he had 3 for 63, 3 for 61, something like that. And he got rave reviews. I think that because I like Ashton Doolin, and I thought Doolin did enough in week 2 that maybe he should be a starting outside receiver for this team, but they went right back to Pierce and Paris Campbell. And this is what's going to be interesting about usage and rates, right? Campbell was still 80-90% snap guy last week, but I wonder after how Pierce played, if that switches and we see Pierce in the second week back from the concussion do more, and it's Tennessee. And generally, when we see the versus Tennessee beside a player, that tends to be good to us. It was certainly good to Mac Hollins last week. So I just want to put that out there that Pierce is a player. We may be talking about him a lot on the waiver wire next week. I'll just put it that way. Will Gray got some questions here. And Cordell Patterson and Dr. Gene, again, folks, you subscribe to Football Guys. We don't get to have Dr. Gene on the Thursday night show anymore, but we're still getting all of his great injury information as part of your subscription. And hopefully you're following him on Twitter, because every Sunday morning he tweets out his thoughts on the injured players. And with Cordell Patterson, he plans to play a painful knee condition. Didn't practice on Wednesday and Thursday, limited practice Friday. So you have that going up against Cleveland. You also have Devontae Smith, weather. Antonio Gibson, Washington. Marquise Brown. Now, Marquise Brown showed up on the injury report on Friday, limited with a foot. Expects to play against Carolina. That's actually an afternoon game, even though it's in Carolina. And then Mike Williams with Keenan Allen out. So at least this gives us an opportunity to give y'all heads up on some injury situations. So Patterson, Smith, Gibson, Brown, Williams, who stands out?
Oh, for me, Mike Williams.
Yeah.
If we're looking at Justin Herbert not on the injury report, if I'm remembering correctly, now with the rib issue, rib cartilage issue, and now going up against the Texans. Now I know that Williams put up a dud last week. What was it, like 1 catch for 15 yards or something along those lines? I mean, but let's move past that. If you want to even look past the week before that, like when he dropped over 100 yards, I mean, to at least feel somewhat confident about his ability to still be a good wide receiver in that offense. You have that right there. But then also look at his opportunity stats like so far. I mean, leading the team in terms of air yards, I mean, target share. And so all of those things are kind of working in his favor. And this is a positive matchup for them. I mean, we don't have, and if we're thinking about what this game could be for him, I mean, if we're looking for any sort of deep shots like from Justin Herbert, because he has at least one ridiculous pass like per week, one highlight reel worthy play like per week. They don't have Jalen Guyton anymore in order to take some of those deep shots because he's on IR. In the red zone, I mean, they've got Josh Palmer. Austin Eckler's yet to really pop off, but also he's involved there too. So I think overall, I think Mike Williams offers the highest floor and ceiling combo without any of the other, like no weather concerns like we see with Devonta Smith. I mean, no tough matchup because Gibson's going up against the Dallas, if I'm remembering correctly. No injury concerns because Marquise Brown, like you said, comes in with that Q tag. So I think out of all of those guys, I mean, Mike Williams doesn't have any of those issues associated with him. So, and he has the best quarterback, I guess, passer. I'll say the best passer out of all of those guys too.
Yeah, I think it's Mike Williams gives you that high ceiling, and generally when Keenan Allen is out, you want to stick with him. And I don't think there's anything compelling enough. So even Cordell Patterson, who we love, even if he plays, that's Mike Wilson. This one should be pretty quick. Will Gray, and this is a good chance to talk about because you do give us the info we need about weather, but it shouldn't overly influence us when we're talking about someone like, I think, Christian Kirk. Will Gray doesn't give us an alternative, but Christian Kirk, how much is his outlook affected by the weather today?
Oh, I would say very little because he's typically plays in the slot. What is it, like 60-70% of his targets have come from the slot like so far this season. And if I'm remembering correctly, Eagles slot corner, Avonte Maddox is supposed to miss today's game, making things a bit easier for him. So yeah, I would definitely start Christian Kirk.
Yeah, absolutely. And John Shipley, I love mentioning him.
Oh yeah, wonderful guy. Yeah,
outstanding human being. Does great work covering the Jags. If you were paying attention to John Shipley this summer, you would have been on James Robinson. But let's put that aside. He mentioned that Jerry Slay's not going to travel with Christian Kirk in this game. So and this because he's a slot receiver. Because if there's one part of the passing game, and Zay Jones, assuming he's healthy, knock on wood, because I want to see him continue the positive momentum he has.
Yeah,
and that's why Trevor Lawrence isn't really. There's a short timing-based passing game they have, not going to be as affected by the weather as some of the downfield stuff that Jalen Hurts does. Okay, Alvin Kamara again out, and Saints came back interception by the Honey Badger, St. Aug, right down the street here.
There we go.
7th Ward. Yeah, it's awesome. Interception, and Saints go down the field, a long play. I mean, a long drive, kind of excruciating, nickel and diming to death, and Chris Olave gets the short touchdown there.
There we go.
Kamara out. A flex. Surprise need for a flex. Hollins, Isaiah McKenzie, or roll the dice with a Rams running back.
I think Mac Hollins, like right off the bat, I think it's an easy one for me.
Yeah, isn't it great that we can keep talking about not just Khalil Mack, the return of the Mac, Mac Hollins, the Eagles. The Eagles let him slip through their fingers, although they've got some great depth. I'll just touch on this real quick with Barry Hickethier. Sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly, Barry. Something tells me McKinnon greater than CEH this week. Is that crazy? The only thing I'll say it's not crazy about that is the Chiefs offense should stay in pass mode.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play McKinnon. If I have both, I'm not playing McKinnon over EdwardsHelaire, but I still won't be surprised. And it's close enough that I would say, I mean, because of the snaps. Again, McKinnon's out snapping EdwardsHelaire, but EdwardsHelaire is much more productive at this point. Okay, Ryan Tressler, start one in PPR. Talk on about a few more players here. Dobbs, who we've talked about. Devin Singletary, who had 9 for 78 and a touchdown last week. J.K. Dobbins, who came back, though without incident, had a few plays that he looked like kind of J.K. Dobbins-ish. Elijah Moore, and then Zay Jones, we just talked about.
I think I like Dubs, like just kind of looking at that group. Because I mean, Zay Jones coming in with the Q tag, Elijah Moore. I mean, we were just talking earlier about Garrett Wilson and his ability to earn targets. Dobbins, I won't talk you out of playing Dobbins today. Just looking at the Bills, like run defense, like and how they played against like Miami, Raheem Mostert, Chase Edmonds getting some work, and I think if we didn't see any setbacks from J.K. Dobbins this week, he could be that type of guy to bust a long one. He could really like save his fantasy day. But out of all that, I think Dubs probably has like the best path to at least a good floor of touches.
Yeah.
And then, like we were just talking earlier, I mean, the coaching staff, like they're raving about him, like after yesterday's game. And if so much of a wide receiver in Green Bay's, like, I guess, future, not just for our fantasy teams, but like their actual career, like depends on being an Aaron Rodgers, like circle of trust. And it seems like Dubs is like making his way like into that circle of trust. I kind of like the way that things are trending for him. So I wouldn't talk you out of him either.
Romeo, where art thou? Romeo in our lineups. Yes. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here with the Packers, we talked about A.J. Dillon earlier. Remember, David Bakhtiari, Elgton Jenkins, not on the injury report.
Yes.
Woo!
Yeah.
We really might see this offense come out of a slumber, if not this week, soon enough. And that's another reason I think to go with him. Rob Monticelli, Curtis Samuel, 2 in a PPR. He's 2 of these. Curtis Samuel, A.J. Dillon, Rashad Bateman, Damian Pierce, or Juju Smith-Schuster.
Pierce for sure for me. We've already started to see him take over a larger share of the workload. Chargers without Joey Bosa for the next almost 2 months.
8 to 10. Yeah.
Yes. So no, definitely like Damian Pierce there. I'd probably go either one of Curtis Samuel or AJ Dillon, since we're just talking about Dillon on the floor for touches. But Curtis Samuel, really showing up as just a solid pass catcher, like from the slot, then also using him out of the backfield, just the way that we wanted him to be used, like since he's moved over to Washington. We're seeing that happen. So either one of those two are fine for me.
Yeah, and I'll say Pierce, and with Pierce, it's really a question of how competitive the Texans can be with the Chargers, which based on what's going on with the Chargers, probably reasonably competitive. I think we can agree on putting a line through Bateman, weather plus you're talking about a boom bust play. Juju Smith-Schuster on paper against Tampa, this should be a game that he gets like 9 catches for 110 yards.
Yes,
but he has not looked explosive. He has not looked like Juju of the early Pittsburgh era. I'm on paper, this matchup should induce Patrick Mahomes to throw the ball 35, 40, 45 times, but I can't go there. Pierce, I'm not going to talk people out of. I'll say both of Samuel and Dillon, but the one I feel with the most FOMO is Dillon. So I think Dillon is the guy I'm going to put the biggest stamp on. But Samuel just doesn't slow down for fantasy. And I feel like Samuel's touches are by design, kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yes.
Like no matter how the game script is, no matter what's going on, he's going to get 6 or 7 short catches. He's going to get 2 or 3 carries. And he's been playing really well. So Curtis Samuel is one of those players that we don't have to ask anymore whether his production is counterfeit or flukish. And certainly against Dallas, doesn't it make sense for them to lean on the short passing game?
100%.
Right? If you're Washington, like you don't want to count to 3 and see Carson Wentz still holding the ball. There are probably bad things are going to happen.
Oh yeah.
I am Ian's cat. And a couple players we've been talking about, but this also gets DK Metcalf into the mix against Detroit. Damian Pierce, AJ Dillon, DK Metcalf, Rashad Bateman, Curtis Samuel, Romeo Doubs. Pick one standard, non-PPR.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see that makes a difference. So in standard, I think I cut out Doubs, cut out Bateman. I'd probably lean more towards the running back. AJ Dillon's probably in the best spot. I think I'd probably go Dillon or Pierce, like out of that group.
Yeah, I agree with that. And with DK, I would just watch out that he may see Jeffrey Okudah,
who's playing really well. Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, he's playing really well. And I think the other thing that we want to watch, I want to say, just because we may not get questions about him, Tyler Lockett. That makes you like Tyler Lockett. He's got back-to-back games with 9 catches, I think. Geno Smith's not shy. Geno Smith's going to throw. Yep. Geno Smith is not your typical backup quarterback that you send in and say, just don't lose the game for us. He just doesn't play like that. So if you're thinking about any questions with Tyler Lockett, because we got about maybe 15 minutes left. I'm not sure we're going to get to all of the players that are on your mind out there, folks, but I want to make sure to mention Tyler Lockett. Ian's cat. I love seeing you in the chat room, man. Ask about Njoku or Isaiah Likely. And you might be the only person out there, Ian's cat, that likes Likely as much as I do, but that's Njoku. All right. Let's see. We haven't got a chance to talk about these running backs yet, so I'm glad that Mel Johnson got this question in. 2 out of 3 in 0.5 PPR. And this gives us a chance to talk about some players that people have questions about this week for sure. Jamal Williams, Khalil Herbert, or Javonte Williams. One of them has to sit, Chris.
Oh,
right? It's going to test you, right?
I know, and I'm just probably going to give the wrong answer regardless. So at least I'll give my reasoning.
Yeah.
I'll say Javonte Williams and Khalil Herbert.
Okay.
And reasoning behind that. I know somebody's going to say that's a horrific take. It's terrible, Chris. But at least for me, like Jamal Williams, like so far, while he has been at least useful, and he has been used like properly as we expect him to, but can we really project him to take over like the entirety of the workload, like with Detroit? They do have Craig Reynolds there. We already
Justin
have
Jackson too.
Justin Jackson as well. And we already have talked about like the other pass catchers that are currently a part of the team. I mean, from TJ Hawkinson, I mean, Josh Reynolds, Khalil Raymond, like blah, 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 blah. But with Khalil Herbert, we can't expect, like, who else is going to take up the workload there? I mean, they really do have outside of, no, it really is just him. I mean, we're not leaning on any other Chicago Bears skill player in our rosters like right now. Nobody even wants to start Justin Fields. Nobody's starting Cole Kmet. Doesn't matter. So at least for him, I can at least see like the projected workload being there for Khalil Herbert. And then with Javonte, it's just more, I'm just being stubborn at this point. Sure. I get it. I know he's in a 50-50 timeshare with Melvin Gordon. I get it. But they do have at least a decent enough matchup where the projected workload should turn into at least efficient production for him today. So at least that's why I lean with those two.
Yeah. It's not easy. I'm going to say, and this is where, and this stubbornness can be very useful in fantasy football. And the reality is, if you watch Javonte Williams, just watching him, you're not disappointed if you took him in the second round based on how he's playing. He's playing the way you expect him to play. It's the Denver offense.
Yes.
And in any given week, and the Raiders defense doesn't scare us. In any given week, he could break a long run, or Denver could start to get some of these things figured out. And that week, you're going to feel remorse, because this isn't one of the situations where it's been so bad that you're hurting, like Darnell Mooney. You even mentioned Darnell Mooney, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to play this straight up. And what's fascinating about this, I guess when I say play this straight up, I'm going with the more recent trends. And I will put a chip on Detroit's offense. And I think Chris and I will agree here, put Herbert in. Because Chicago's going to run the ball 35 times, and Herbert's going to run the ball probably 22 of those times. And he's running the ball really well, and it's against the Giants. So the Giants aren't going to run away and hide from the Bears. And it doesn't matter anyway, because if they do, they're still going to keep running Herbert. So I think it comes down to the two Williams. And I'm saying Jamal Williams simply, again, because maybe I'm being overconfident on the offense that does have things figured out, the Detroit offense, and how Jamal Williams has been automatic inside the 5. 0.5 PPR helps me with that a little bit, because with Javonte Williams, he did have at least that one game that 10, 11 catches. We'll see. But this is, these are the kinds of questions that we're just not quite out of that period yet, where ADP, Adam Harstad's there jabbering at us. ADP should figure into your decisions, and that would make it really tough to leave Javonte Williams on the bench for two running backs that weren't even on rosters in some leagues.
Correct.
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So that's fantasy football for you. Real quick, Barry had another question about defense. We've got to talk team defenses. Dallas or Green Bay?
Lean Dallas.
Right? Carson Wentz.
Carson, I mean, it's just like you were saying earlier, just that ability to, if you can make him think, versus if Ron Rivera and Scott Turner, like they just here, just grip it and rip it. Just, get the ball out as quickly as possible, because if you allow him to think, what's going to happen like shortly thereafter. And with Micah Parsons being the way that he's been playing, Trayvon Diggs, I mean, I just think that they've been able to get pressure at an above average rate like so far. I do think that Dallas is in store for, a decent amount of getting pressure to him and a couple of turnovers as well.
It's always possible that the Green Bay defense, and Green Bay is still an excellent, excellent defense play this week.
Oh, yeah.
They're in Lambeau, and they should have a favorable game script. Brian Hoyer is not exactly a quarterback that's that prone to total meltdowns like Carson Wentz. And again, with Dallas's ability to get pressure on the quarterback, you saw it last week with Philadelphia, once Wentz had to face consistent pressure, you see him turn back into the Carson Wentz that fans were happy to see leave the team in Indianapolis. So real quick, we'll touch on this one from Dave Malone. Devontae Parker, Jacoby Myers is out, or Richie James, PPR.
So let's see. Last week, Devontae Parker had one of his best games, if I remember correctly, like bumped over 100 yards. I would say that, you're going to get the floor from Richie James. So if that's what you're looking for, I get it. So I do lean Richie James in this matchup. He will have at least a somewhat better passer. I mean, if we're having to qualify who's the better passer between Brian Hoyer and Daniel Jones, that's probably a bad thing. But I do think that at least Richie James so far, like he was looking like the at least more integrated into his offense than Devontae Parker before last week. And again, more stable passing game at this point compared to the two. So I lean Richie James.
Yeah, Richie James is going to come in with like an 8 for 39 line today.
Should be good enough.
But that's good enough in PPR leagues.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. We just got a couple more minutes left. I'm trying to find some questions with some players we haven't talked about yet. D-Cup 22. Josh Palmer. We talked about Mike Williams. We didn't talk about Josh Palmer. Josh Reynolds or Alan Lazard?
Lean towards Josh Palmer. Wouldn't talk you out of Alan Lazard. I think something between like those two. Just because when Keenan Allen out, we know what Palmer's opportunity is going to be in that offense, and we're already kind of excited about Justin Herbert going up against Houston anyway. So I lean towards Palmer, but again, Alan Lazard, we know what his role is, and even if we are somewhat more excited about Romeo Doubs, then I think it's still fine. Alan Lazard can still produce in that offense too.
Yeah, I think just again, Josh Palmer hasn't exactly looked great, and his production hasn't come in situations where he's been really pulling the sword from the stone and making plays for the Chargers, but the production has still been there, and it is the Texans. Real interesting to watch why also in that game, Darryl Stingley. These rookie corners, Sauce Gardner, some of these, and too bad Trent McDuffie got hurt because he was playing really well. Although there are other
Sauce
rookies.
getting into it with Jamar Chase last week. I thought that was really interesting. I like that. Yeah.
Yes. And what you love seeing about that with Sauce, real quick, is that you get the feeling from his style play and how he played that he looks forward to that. He's looking forward to that.
Like Jalen Ramsey-esque in terms of that. Like just getting in the mental portion of it.
Yes. When you're out on that island, that is very, very important. Full PPR and a big underdog. We'll see. Got to watch his Bengals win on Thursday. Your Bengals. Devin Singletary, Travis Etienne, or Treylon Burks?
Lean towards lean towards Singletary. Because it looks like the Bills passing game is kind of evolving at this point because we're moving away from Josh Allen, the guy with the cannon, the guy always looking deep and all that, to an actual quick passing game offense like we saw it last week against Miami, when Miami would either try and get pressure with their front four or even just limit their perimeter passing game. Like Josh Allen had answers to it. That's where we saw, what was it? Like I think Singletary had like 9 targets last week, or something along those lines, just last week. So if he's now getting a more, I guess, well-rounded involvement, like in the offense, like not just as the primary rusher, but also getting involved in the passing game, like I do think Singletary has the best path to a decent fantasy day. Yeah,
Singletary looks good, and I think that it's just funny how we go through this with the Bills every year. Like they have to be reminded that Singletary is a good player. Etienne, he's not a mutter. I don't see him as a player. That's James Robinson, baby.
Oh, right? Yeah, that is.
Yeah. And then Treylon Burks. And again, it's kind of like we're talking about with Javonte Williams, where you don't want one of the most common mistakes of fantasy football is this is going to be the week. I know that this is going to be the week when we're betting on trends to reverse. But with Burks, I will actually appeal to the rate and use stats that he had 97% route participation, which I think is like on a passing play. Was he running a route last week? So they're scaling up his participation in the offense, even though his numbers weren't good last week in what was a good matchup against the Raiders. However, this was a player that everybody out of Titans camp saying, give it time. By week 8 or so, you're going to see Burks more integrated in this offense and see his gifts and why they wanted him in the first round, essentially trading A.J. Brown for him, why they were excited about him. So that tells me that there actually is going to be one of these weeks he pops. And against Indianapolis, who is a brick wall against the run. You aren't going to run on Indianapolis. They're kind of like those Tampa teams. And I think Shaq Leonard's going to play today.
I think so. It sounds like it, yeah.
I hope Shaq Leonard plays today. I really do. This could be a Treylon Burks game. This could be a game where he plays a much bigger role in the offense in terms of touches, not just participation. Right. And is there anything else? Because it's interesting to see the questions. Let's touch on Gabe Davis really quick. Hollins over Kirk? No, not Hollins over Kirk. Hollins over Gabe Davis, who's banged up and again potentially weather playing a part there in Baltimore.
I wouldn't argue with that, especially if it's a PPR league, like full PPR. I'm not going to argue with that at all. In half PPR, we did see what last week when Baltimore's defense played. I mean, the opposing offense picking on the number 2 corner, like for Baltimore. Like we're not going to test, Marcus Peters on the other side, but like that number 2 corner, like for Baltimore, let's continue to pick on him, and that could be where Gabe Davis like winds up getting at least breaking off like a couple of long catches or something along those lines to at least have a decent fantasy day. So it's half. I would say go with Gabe Davis, but if it's full PPR, yeah, it's Matt Collins for me.
Yeah, I think I'll go with Hollins. And I love Gabe Davis, and I was excited after what we saw in week 1. But I think with this ankle thing continuing to come up and the extra added weather, Baltimore's matchup is a good one, as Chris is pointing out. I probably would think that Gabe Davis is one of those players you have on your bench. And if he goes off this week, you're happy because that means you feel comfortable using him going forward. Are you all comfortable, Dane M. asking Allen Robinson or Russell Gage? And this, I don't even know. It's really like, do you want to nudge anyone to play Allen Robinson at this point?
I can't.
Tomorrow night against San Francisco? Yeah.
I can't. I mean, we're already hearing stuff about how the Rams are using Ben Skowronek like as a fullback or something like that.
It's a real nice play.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it's like if we're not hearing really anything positive about Allen Robinson at this point, it's just I can't advocate for him. It's tough.
Yeah, again, someone come up with that term.
Chicago sapped all the life out of him.
Yeah. I mean, it happens, and I think it's also just this offensive line is not very good, and you have in this game, I would expect not very much offense. Trent Williams is out for San Francisco. Generally, also the 49ers last year in Santa Clara beat Stafford 31-10. Okay. And it wasn't like Stafford was outstanding in the other games. In the last game of the season, he pulled it together in time. And it's not a game I have a lot of confidence in either offense. So it's again, and thanks everyone for turning out, even while we have real football going on. And it's such a great turnout that it's tough to get past the questions that people get in before the time that we're even scheduled to start, Chris. So it's great to be in demand. I'll be answering some questions on my Twitter feed as long as I can. You have my projections, Jason Woods, Moral Tremblay's projections. And again, watch the weather up until game time in Baltimore and in Philadelphia. And
Jersey too for the Giants game.
Yeah, for the Giants-Bears game. So you can decide to, well, I don't know if it's going to change any decisions. Maybe the defenses. But it's great, folks. It's already week 4. And we're getting up to speed now. I think that we're going to start being able to separate the signal from the noise, and we're going to start seeing some of these teams really get to cruising altitude, and we're going to continue to keep up with the NFL season that keeps us off balance. But it's why we need each other. We spend time together every Sunday, 10 a.m. on the YouTube channel, and we get to hang out. So thanks, everybody. As always, it's a joy and a pleasure and a privilege to get to serve you because you're so classy.